your, no swearing, Lisa. I'm just kidding. We're going to record it. This is bringing back our Monday mindset, but bringing it back in a monthly mindset. So we are very privileged and honored to have Heather Perucchi. And she did the last one, or the second to last one that we did before we kind of revamped everything. And Heather, why don't you give a little bit about your background so those who didn't join us that last one know who you are.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Perucchi. I'm a licensed therapist and a clinical consultant. I run a company called ChangeWorks LLC, and it's really based in the foundation that change does work. That, you know, our aim is to create a system in Hawaii where people can access the care and the coaching that they need. I've spent, I don't know, math's not really my talent, but maybe 11 or so years doing direct work with various populations, all the way from our chronically homeless to high-level executives. So I like to say that I'm multifaceted, although I'm not sure if I was in a definition contest, I'd be able to tell you what that word means. I'm just honored to be here with all of you guys and spend some time talking about, I don't know, personal development, motivation, encouragement. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons why we wanted to have her here, so please continue to come back, continue to join us and spread the word to get, you know, more people here. But there's so many classes in coaching. Everyone knows that KW is a coaching and education training mentorship company. That's what we're strong in. But I think there's also something to say about self-care and personal development, as Heather alluded to. So we wanted to make sure that we cover that aspect as well, which is not necessarily a KW kind of driven thing, but it's something that's important and should have attention nonetheless. So I'm going to hand things over to Heather. Heather, you have the floor, and you can share screens. You can do whatever you want to do, and look forward to hearing what you have to provide today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So I have a couple of concepts to talk about today, really at the basis of what we're gonna, in a kind of broad scope, talk about is what I like to talk about as connection. So connection is this very broad term. In Hawaii, the word is lokahi, which actually technically means unbroken, means already connected. So I used connection as today's foundation because what we're going to do today is start at step one. The philosophy that I'm operating from is that we start with the self, and then from care of the self, we can branch out into care of others, care for our teams, care for our families. And then after we sort of master those intentions, we can move towards the community. And it really does operate from this idea that if we are not fully and wholly ourselves, we are really unable to give fully and wholly to anyone else, whether it's a partner, a child, a team, a community. So why are we here? Well, we're here because you guys asked me to come and share with you. We're here because I want to help you understand the why of why we do things, not the why of KW necessarily, not the why of your teams, but the why of you and what brings you to this purpose every single day. And so I really want to start with our internal programming. I'm going to talk about maybe some potential barriers, how to navigate change, and we'll define mine a little bit. Full disclosure, I tend to be super aggressive with how much information I can talk about in an hour. And this really is intended to be collaborative. So if you have questions, you can interrupt me. Please feel free to unmute and ask questions. This is not a lecture per se, more of a collective, but I wanted to at least start with how do we begin? So with every session that I do as a therapist, every training that I do as a consultant, every sort of building or motivational project that I work on, I always want to start with setting our intention. So I'll give you a personal example. This morning I woke up, I was a little bit grumpy, had kind of a rough week. So my first intention was, I have the ability to flip this attitude. So I got up, I went to work out, I had a good attitude when I worked out, I came home and I decided to take a couple of deep breaths. So today's intention from the very beginning that we're going to set is I'm here and I'm present for this time. Today's session is talking about a deeper understanding of ourself. We're going to review a little bit about what we talked about last time in terms of wellness, because I know that resonated with a lot of you guys, but I want to help you understand what it means to focus on yourself. I also want to help you understand the definition or the deeper meaning of the word mindset. We do a ton of work around setting our intentions and setting our mindsets, but a lot of us don't really know what that means. And so I want to help you guys understand how to identify where our self may be misaligned with our mindset and vice versa. The whole idea behind setting an intention is to allow yourself to be super in this particular moment. Get it? Your lives are busy. You guys are always being pulled here and there and everywhere. But for today, for this kind of 45, 50 minutes, I'd really love it if you could just be here with us today, talking about how we set intentions for ourselves. The next step, since I know a lot of you guys are doing planning and you kind of work quarters ahead in your business, is once we understand that, I'll try to help set a few seeds for what next steps are for you guys in terms of like what we're going to talk about next month, then how we're going to build there. Does anybody not feel like they want to set an intention? Totally okay. You can tune me out. I get it. But I would love it if all of you would take a super deep breath with me, just all the way in through your nose. Let it carry all the way down through your throat, all the way into your belly. Let your belly expand. Feel the air blowing up like a balloon. Hold it for just a second and then let it out. Maybe we'll do that one more time so I can do it without talking. Cool. So a little review from our last time. One of my dogs, who probably will bark during this, is sitting right next to me, so beware of that. We talked a lot about wellness and how to stay well, but what we did last time was we talked about how being well is not something that happens automatically. It's not something that you just sort of wish for, but rather being well or being in a state of wellness is an actively pursued goal. It's a way that we really intentionally set ourselves up for success to be not just physically well, but emotionally well, physiologically well, so how your mind and your body work together, environmentally well, and even in some ways community well, where what we give into our community is also what we get fed with. So being well is a super active process. We make really dedicated choices towards living a healthy and fulfilling life. Sometimes that's the food that we eat, sometimes the physical activity that we get, sometimes that's what we read, sometimes that's what we watch on TV. So we also talked a little bit about the difference between stress and burnout. Stress is an overengagement. This is when you have too many things on your plate is overfilled, there's things spilling off, you're forgetting about appointments, you're forgetting about fun things that you're supposed to be doing with your friends or your family. And burnout is actually a disengagement. So when you become burnt out, it's actually a removal from your life. It's a, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to back out and I'm going to sit in a state of what we would call like stasis or removal from our obligations. So stress is an overengagement and burnout is a disengagement. Burnout especially is a very, very specific type of workplace stress. Generally speaking, we don't get burnt out just with home life. We often get burnt out with work life that compiles on top of other things. So burnout is a state of physical and emotional exhaustion that also involves a sense of reduced accomplishment, which generally speaking is aligned with work life. I'm sure at some point somebody will come out with some research around how home lives are just as capable of burnt out. But for purposes of our wellness review that we're doing today, burnout is really specifically associated with the workplace. So one of the solutions to stress and burnout is connection. It's a partial solution for setting a foundation to rebuild that wellness, including things like vulnerability, sharing how we feel. Sometimes it's asking for help from professionals, sharing our joys, sharing our concerns, even just saying, I'm not sure what to do next, can you help me? And really at the end of the day, we depend on our excellent communication skills as the groundwork for building a foundation of any relationship, whether personal or in the workplace. So why do we do this? Well, part of it's learning and engagement, right? So I know you guys have talked about a lot of things in your personal development with KW, and to avoid overdoing it or talking about the same stuff over and over again, The point of these activities is to help you better understand yourself. Personal development really is a way for us to create talents within ourselves that fit a workplace or a goal. And when I talk about wellness, I'm talking about how do I, as a person, a human being, feel better? And how do I bring a better version of myself into the world that I live in? So the point is, I'm going to bring the best version of myself to whatever it is that I do, whether it's therapy sessions, whether it's coaching, whether it's walking my dogs and saying hello to people on the street, things like that. So when I feel my best self, I am usually on the very intentional side of the wellness spectrum. What do we do with this? Well, we learn from it. We try things. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we find stuff we really love that we had no idea we loved. I've been a runner for 25 years. I started doing like a boot camp type class and realized I love lifting weights. Not very good at it. I can't lift very heavy, but I realized that one of the ways that I can feel super powerful in my physical self is when I lift weights. And so I've started to come to the side of like, women can lift weights too, and women can be super strong too. And that has helped me feel like a more well person. Where do we begin? Well, we start at the beginning. I mean, we have to better understand where we are in order to understand where we're going to go. So identifying our communication styles with ourselves, understanding how we feel well, that will support our sense of self, and then it will build into supporting our team, and then supporting our agency, and then supporting our community. Often we talk about all those things at once. So today we're just going to talk about our own self wellness. So get ready, because we're talking about mindset. There are no less than 1,000 books on mindset. I've read a couple of them. They're all brilliant. They all come from someone's perspective. And, I was doing a bunch of research this week to kind of hone this training for you guys and make it the most relevant. And really, I think in order for me to be the most helpful to you guys, I want to just define what mindset is. Mindset is something that you carry as a human. We don't have a work mindset. We don't have a community mindset. We only really have a mindset that belongs to us. So mindset is considered a defined set of attitudes that's held by someone. This comes from so many different places. It comes from your family. It comes from how you were raised. It comes from the type of schooling that you got or didn't get. It comes from political affiliations. It comes from lessons that we've learned. It comes from failures that we've had. It comes from successes that we've had. So I like to think of mindset as a fluid process in which we are sort of continuously evolving our attitude about ourselves. So some people call it values, some people call it a belief system. Really, it's how you operate in your day-to-day. So I'm fairly confident that you guys have talked about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Fixed being, we already have all the talents that we are going to have, and we just have to operate within that, versus growth mindset, where we're constantly evolving and changing. Practice comes 98% from a growth mindset. The 2% is sometimes we're born with chemical differences that other people don't have, and so we need to work within that. But I do believe that about 98% of what we do is controllable by ourselves. So mindset is attitudes that we hold. It can be stuck in fixed, it can be stuck in growth, it can be a combination of the two. And at the end of the day, it directly influences how we manage stress, how we cope with stress, and how we manage setbacks or failures. And I'm sort of I don't know, the Vaynerchuk train of like, failure is a good thing. You learn from it. When I try something and I'm not good at it, doesn't mean I never need to do it again, but it doesn't mean I need to do it. I'm an expert at it either. So our mindset really does help shape our attitude towards the day. Okay, so Simon Sinek talks a ton about finding our why. And in clinical work or behavioral health work, the why tends to be the place that we start. And in doing some of this research, I realized that when we're looking for our why, we're looking for what a lot of people call purpose. It's funny, I was studying the concept of ikigai, which has been attributed to like kind of Japanese culture, but then I read something that said maybe it come from that. It was a guy who mixed two philosophies together and came up with calling it that. And so I'm going to have to do some further research and come back to you guys about that. But Ikigai is kind of the idea of like what you're passionate about, what you can make money at, what you love doing, and what the community needs. And Ikigai is supposed to be that centerpiece that's like fills all of those pieces. But to make it simple for you guys, to make it something that you can do quickly, why is the reason that you do things. And it's a deeper understanding of what gives you purpose to get up every day in the morning. Mine is to create a system of care in Hawaii, maybe someday the world, but today it's Hawaii, that will allow people to get connected to the care that they need. That might be people who are houseless, getting connected to behavioral health providers, to housing providers, to medical care. That might be high level executives getting connected to someone that can help them with professional coaching. That might be helping a nonprofit develop a program that meets a need in the community. Everybody's why is different. My why is I want to help get people connected to the things that they need. So we're going to find our why. It's in the middle of everything that we do. So why is it important? Well, I could use the whole like because I said so, but for purposes of today, we're going to define it a little bit. So why is the why important? Well, the why is the purpose, the cause, or the belief that drives each one of us. So maybe your purpose is to make enough money for your family so that you can retire at the age of 45 and you can spend the rest of your days watching your kids grow up, send them off to college, enjoy life with your partner, retire in some remote community, buy an island. I don't know. It could be that your purpose is money. It could also be that your purpose is to figure out how to solve cystic fibrosis and find a cure. It could be that you want to develop teams within Keller Williams that helps to make it a gazillion-dollar company. Your why doesn't necessarily need to fit with anybody else's why. It really just needs to be something that you identify that's meaningful for you. The business tagline of finding your why is people don't buy what you're selling, they buy why you're selling it. So I firmly believe that part of the reason that some of the things that I teach resonate with people is because my why is super firmly planted in getting people connected to the care that they need. If I didn't have that why, it wouldn't matter what I was doing because it wouldn't seem authentic. So figuring out the purpose, cause, or belief that drives you is what will help you connect with other people on a much more personal level. Our why is what connects us to the greater good of our community. But you can't connect to the greater good of the community until you identify the why of why you do the things that you do. So much like this morning where I woke up grumpy and didn't really want to do anything, the why also helps us to continue to show up. It helps us to understand, in combination with wellness and understanding what stress and burnout, it helps drive us to continue to show up and to produce. I would hope as well that the work that we're going to kind of do a little bit later on, that your why would also help you create really good boundaries around shop and producing. So it may be that 50% is all that you can do. It may be that tomorrow you can do 1,000%, but today you can show up with 50. So knowing your why, your purpose, and your cause is important, but understanding when to stop driving yourself into the ground is also important. So your why becomes your belief system, but it also becomes that accountability person for yourself internally. Here's kind of my biggest concern for all of you, because I know that you're all driven and I know that you all want to be really successful. If you skip over the development of your why, you will build a shaky foundation of yourself. It will inhibit your growth. It will not allow you to move beyond the what, and it will not drive you to build a bigger picture of how you connect with yourself, connect with each other, and connect with your community. The last one I sort of threw in for good measure. We're not going to have a ton of time to talk about authenticity today, but just know that if we struggle with finding our why and we skip over that step, the things that we do in the what can feel very inauthentic to the rest of our community. And I tell you what, I don't want to purchase things. I don't want to get involved with people, and I don't want to spend time with people who are inauthentic or feel like they're being shady. I know you guys know what I'm talking about because I know you've run into those people. It's people who are driven to do things for the what as opposed to the why. Everybody make sense so far? Everybody still with me? Do we need another deep breath?
I have a question that I can,
Sure.
if I can throw something out there. Is it possible to have multiple whys, multiple motivations from people?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that question. It's a fantastic question. Um, I have multiple whys. And one of the things when I developed ChangeWorks and I started my company was I had this mission statement that was like 3 whys long. And people were like, it's too long, you can't pitch it in an elevator. And I said, well, I'm not going on Shark Tank, so I don't need to pitch it in 30 seconds. But I get what you're saying. I mean, my why was I want people who are houseless to have homes. I don't think that you can move beyond the initial need of self until you have a roof over your head. I want people to get connected to the care that they need, whether they're houseless or they're millionaires living on whatever the millionaire part of Oahu is. I also I also really want to help people identify their why so we stop putting inauthentic business practices out into the world. I really don't want to buy things from people who feel skeevy to me. So yes, the short answer is yes. The long answer is as long as your whys aren't fighting with each other, you can have multiple. Mine tend to build on each other because they usually focus on how to get people where they need to go. And when one doesn't fit, it tends to kind of self-select out. So how do we find it? Well, first we have to start with what our foundation is. So I don't want to presume to guess any of your guys' foundations, but I would guess that you wanted to maybe have a couple of things happen when getting into Keller Williams. One, you probably wanted some freedom of scheduling. Two, you probably wanted the opportunity to make money in a non-typical way. And three, you probably wanted to find some level of success. And so understanding the why gives us a foundation into figuring out what it is. Our intent is also half the battle, right? So if we know our why, the next steps are much easier to follow. If you identify that you want to help people get connected to the system of care in Hawaii, then you know that your next step is which population do I want to work with? Finding your why also helps you improve relationships, connections with others. I just had a conversation about this last night with someone. It really also, like operating from your why, helps you avoid taking things super personally. So it'll create healthier work environments too. And then the last part, which kind of, propels us into our next step, is it drives engagement with ourselves and it drives engagement with each other. Once you identify your why, it's easier for you to have conversations with other people about why you do what you do and how hard you're going to work to get there. I also want to give you a word of caution. Your why is not something that you find an endpoint to. There's no there's a beginning, but there's really no end. You will likely take your last breath still living and evolving your why over time. Your why might be different at 20 than it is at 50. So what do we do? Well, grab your pen, grab your paper. I know you all have books that you take notes in. Please don't make fun of my old school way of taking notes with a pen and paper. You can also use your phones if you want to. But we're going to do a little exercise so that I can help you. I'm just moving my thing so that I can help you figure out your why. And remember, you don't have to figure it out today. So if you don't find it today, that's cool. You can work on it tomorrow. You can work on it next week. But I bet you it's closer than you think it is. So here's your practical steps. The first step is we're going to ask some questions. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes, maybe not a couple, but I'll give you a minute or two with each question. And I want you to take the time to go with your gut. Try not to make it huge picture. Try to just jot down what immediately comes to mind. I apologize, my PowerPoint skills are not amazing. Otherwise, I would have done that cool sneak in with each question, and then you wouldn't have been able to read all of them. I probably need a tutorial. So any of you who are PowerPoint people, holler at me. But your first question is, what makes you come alive? What makes you want to bounce out of bed in the morning? What drives you and makes you drool until that day comes? Okay. I'm guessing all of you probably have at least one thing that makes you come alive. This one's tougher, and I've honestly been kind of asking myself this question for the last kind of, I don't know, 20 years. What would I do with my time all day if money was no object? If all of your needs were met and you didn't have to worry about budgets, you didn't have to worry about mortgages, you didn't have to worry about food, what would you do all day? And yes, it's totally okay if you would do nothing. We can work with that. My theory is that you would get very bored if you did nothing all day, but it's okay if that's what your answer is. And before we move on to the strengths part, I'm curious to know if what makes you come alive and what you would do all day if money was no object are the same. I can only see 6 of you, but I see Chad nodding his head. I see Hannah nodding her head. That's cool. Seems like your things you love to do and what you would do all day are aligned, so you're ahead of half the class. Okay, so we discover our strengths. One of the next steps after you ask these open-ended questions to yourself are, what do I like doing? What are the things that when I see them on my calendar, I don't want to cancel them? What are the things that I wake up on? I know you guys don't necessarily have typical weekends, but on Saturday morning when you wake up and there maybe isn't anything on your calendar, what are the things that you think about doing first? What are the things that you can't wait to do? After you consider the things that you like doing, that maybe Saturday morning at 9 a.m. you're like, oh, I can't wait to do this. What are you good at? What are your talents? What are the things that you offer to yourself, to your partners, to your team members, to your community? What are the talents that you lend? If this question is hard for you, maybe there's a self-esteem struggle in there or an assertiveness or awareness struggle in there, think about what people ask you to do when they're asking for your contribution. Think about the needs that they ask you to fulfill for them if you have a tough time figuring out what you're good at or identifying 1 or 2 things. Okay. Everybody still with me? Okay. So my first question is, under the strengths category, is what you like doing and what you are good at, do those 2 things align? Are they the same? Are they similar? Things that people ask you to do maybe are also things that you like doing? That's a tough one for me. People ask me to do things I don't want to do relatively often. And then before we move on to the third question, what makes you come alive? What would you do all day? Do those align with what you like doing and what you're good at? One of my biggest ones does not align and it drives me bananas, but I think I can find a way to reconcile it. It's probably a lifelong journey, but That's okay, we got time. So if those two things align, then you're ahead of 3/4 of the population, because not only do you know what makes you come alive and you know what you would do all day if money was no object, but you also have merged that with what you like doing and what you're good at. So I would guess at this point that those of you whose those 4 questions align, you likely have already identified your why, or you're close to identifying it. This third question is a little bit harder, and it sort of stems from what am I good at, right? So where do I add value? Where do my talents serve a greater purpose? Where does my quiet ability to be able to get a classroom of kindergartners to be quiet lend itself to the value of a community? I did teach kindergarten for a year. I will never do it again, but I did have a keen ability to be able to bring all of those kindergartners together and make them be quiet. So that's where I added value. But where do you add value? If you need a different way to look at that, if you want a different type of question, where do I contribute to my community, whether I enjoy doing it or not? Where is my value add? This one's a trickier jump and might be a bigger bridge, but does the answer to number 3 align with 1 and 2? That's your next question. If you're having trouble coming up with where you add value, please interrupt me so that I can give you an encouragement. Okay. Chad, you look like you want to say something snarky.
I do, and I won't.
It's okay. You know, we often take these things like super, super seriously, and they are. Like identifying our why and what drives us and our purpose, it's super important to leading a fulfilling life. But remember, you guys, there's a lot of people in the world that not only never find their why, but don't ever have a problem with not identifying their why. Like a lot of folks really are okay with just living their life and going through life maybe in a little bit of a tunnel. Like you don't have to do this work. Nobody's gonna kind of pin you down and force you to do this deeper work on the self. But if you want to identify your why and you want to find a different level of success in the life that you live, this is the kind of work that will help you get to that point. Identifying your why is such a foundational part of identifying what you leave, and that leads us into question number 4, which is, what is my legacy? Michael, that's actually, I just saw the chat. That's one of my favorite quotes. And, you know, Dolly Parton was so like unashamedly herself. It's funny because I don't know if it was Netflix maybe, but somebody just did a piece on her. And you know that her hair was a wig, and that every time she went out in public, she took the wig off and nobody ever recognized her. And really, like, she was so committed to playing the character of Dolly Parton that nobody could tell when she wasn't that character. And I found that kind of intriguing, because is that inauthentic or is that super intentional? Right? Like being Dolly Parton was super intentional, but I wonder if being non-Dolly Parton was also super intentional. So you can sort of, you know, spin yourself into a tizzy trying to figure out what the answer is. So what's your legacy? What do you want to leave behind? I'd like to leave behind dogs that don't bark when I'm on a Zoom call. But what do I want to give back to my community? And by the way, this doesn't have to be something that you're famous for. Your legacy can be very quiet and very subdued. Your legacy can be enough money for your kids to go to college. Your legacy can be a white paper that you never got published, but you put out into the internet that hopefully inspires other people to grab onto whatever the theory or thesis is that you're making. What are you going to leave to the world when you're no longer with us? I haven't quite figured out what my legacy is yet. So remember, this is a fluid evolutionary process. This is not something that you need to figure out today, but it is something that I would encourage you to really brainstorm, because here's when we were talking about Ikigai and that little center part that aligns everything. Here's how you discover your why. Does 1 align with 2? Does 1 and 2 align with 3? And then do 1, 2, and 3 align with 4? And if the answer is yes, fantastic. You've likely already discovered your why. And this is amazing. And I want to celebrate it with you. And if I had access to my emojis right now, I totally would, like send you the clapping ones or the confetti cannon. But if you haven't, this is just an opportunity for you to set an intention to think about this differently. You don't have to have all the answers, and you don't have to have 1, 2, 3, and 4 figured out today. But here's what we can talk about next. I have found my why. Now, what do I do with it? And this is, this is kind of from my belief system. Unless you come to therapy because you have something really specific to work on, I think a lot of people come to therapy or seek coaching and personal development because they sort of know why they do things, but they want somebody to really help them understand why they continue to do that. And they want to understand the things that don't align. So if you found your why, or your 1 and 2 align, this slide is going to be such a calming encouragement for you. If you found your why and your why is solid, which I firmly believe mine is, great. Congratulations. I'm incredibly proud of you. You have set the foundation for the next couple of mindsets that we're going to do. I'm super excited to develop that and help you share it with the world. You may also have a why that changes over time. My why in my 20s was to become a licensed social worker and work with kids in the foster care system and get them connected to families that would adopt them. Clearly, I'm not doing that anymore. So I think my why, getting people connected to the care that they need, is probably similar, but the type of work that I'm doing to support my why and to further my why is different. And so you might have a why that sort of changes over time. You might live with a partner who loses their job and you have to go get a job that pays more because you got to support your family. That why may have to be on pause for a little while because you're doing something that's very, very closely connected to the what instead. There's very, very few rules or obligations around navigating your why or figuring it out. Like it's not an end place. It's not a place where you live. It's a place where you constantly reaffirm and reevaluate what you're doing. So I hope that finding a why or having some alignment with this exercise helps you feel much more like you imagined it would, that there's a calmness that comes with that, that there's a reassurance that all the work that you've been doing around your development of self and your work is working, that you're taking the right steps to figure out what's next, to engage in your team and your community. You may even, I know it's kind of a crazy concept, but you may even be enriching the lives of people around you without even realizing that you're doing it. You're operating from a place where your internal self is so dedicated to your why that it's spilling out to other people through how you model yourself, through how you carry yourself, through how you encourage other people, to how you show up, even when other people might not. So another really cool evolutionary thing about finding your why and figuring out what to do with it is that you may work even harder than you were before, but it might not feel like you're working as hard. You may find yourself with way more energy. You may find yourself not paralyzed by fear or being afraid anymore. You may find yourself highly engaged in your day-to-day rather than feeling defeated when you wake up in the morning and starting from that place of defeat. So finding your why is fantastic, but it really is a starting point for you. It's a way for you to understand how to better enrich your own life, but also how you might better enrich the lives of the clients that you work with, the teams that you work with, even your bosses, and being influential for the people that you report to and modeling awesome employee and contractor skills. And then from there, like the world's kind of your oyster. Your why can help you volunteer. Your why can help you change programs. Your why can help you, push legislation. Your why can help you elect a president. I don't know. There's all kinds of things that your why can help you do. So if you find yourself feeling calmer, feeling more energy around the things that you're doing, it's likely because you've identified your why and you're starting to work towards having your day-to-day really live that why. So a couple of quick reminders. One, your why is fluid, and coming to a place where your why starts to propel the things that you do can help your life feel a little bit easier. When I was working, for those of you that have heard this story already, I apologize, but when I was working for the nonprofit, I couldn't understand why I was tired all the time. I couldn't understand why I had a hard time getting out of bed, because I was living my why. I was working with populations that really struggled to stay connected to care. I was working with populations that didn't know where else to go. And I was in an administrative position in which I was running teams and influencing the next generations of care. So I couldn't understand why I felt exhausted all the time. I had gained weight. I was eating really poorly. I wasn't working out nearly as much as I wanted to. And I just couldn't really identify what was happening because my why was being fulfilled. But what I realized is that your why propels your work, but it doesn't necessarily help you find where you're going to practice your why. And so what I realized was, working for the nonprofit, I had all of these tasks that I didn't enjoy doing. And all of that administration and management and writing people up and all that other kind of stuff didn't really bring me any closer to my why. In fact, it sort of distracted me from it. And so I realized that I had found my why, but it had sort of gotten lost in this jumble of other obligations. And so what I did was left and started my own company. And now I get to do the why stuff way more frequently. The administrative stuff is still there, but it's a lot less because it's just me and a couple of subcontractors. So there's less HR, there's less of that kind of drama. And that had really distracted me from the purpose of ChangeWorks, which, kind of full circle, is to create a community of care that people can really be engaged and find the support that they need and stay connected to them, even when they're at their worst. So, one reminder, your why can change over time. Two, your why may not always give you the clear answer on the what. So you still got to do the work around where you find your good fit in your community. And I got to tell you, not being paralyzed by fear and not being paralyzed by failure will really help you continue to live your why day to day to day. So those are your sort of quick reminders. I do believe that if you take a step back from the life that you're living and you start to think about how you impact and influence other people, all of you will find many ways that you're already impacting the people around you. So, questions before we do a quick review? You guys were so quiet. Most of the time, people are interrupting me all the time.
This is so just polite. Such good stuff. We're absorbing it so much.
Aw, who just said that? Thank you.
It's me, Chris. My video's off because I'm not dressed in the most business attire at the moment. But
I'm wearing my therapist sweater today. So nice to meet you, Chris.
Very professional.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you for all this. This is wonderful.
Oh, I'm so glad you're enjoying it. Thank you.
Yes, it's very inspiring and very, very eye-opening. I appreciate it a lot. And I don't have my video because I'm, very not presentable.
It's okay. I think we all have different ideas of what presentable looks like. I just try to be clean. Like, that's like my number one thing. And a little bit of transparency, I do feel like my one-on-one therapy clients have been much more forgiving during home-based therapy because I tend to dress a lot more casual during my video sessions than I did when I met with them in person. So, our why is fluid. It's okay. Any other questions or feedback?
I'll be vulnerable and throw a comment out. So I'm doing, I did all the exercise. I have nothing for where do I add value. I don't even know what to to put in there, but that's probably no surprise. But what's interesting is the things that, like, some of my why is making a positive impact in other people's lives through like coaching and teaching and mentorship and these kind of things. And if money was no object, what would I do? I'd probably be doing that. But what's interesting though is, like, I don't necessarily like the process of that. I like the end result of that. So sometimes I feel I'm a little bit in conflict with that, because sometimes that process can be extremely draining. And so when you made a point, you said, like, when you look at your calendar, what's that thing that you look at that you might like, that you want to dive into? I'm conflicted, because I do and I don't. I do because I know that I can positively impact someone, which fills my bucket. But it's almost like the marathon. I'd want to be on the last leg of that, crossing the finish line, but I know all the work up front is a bear on both sides. So it's a little bit in conflict.
Well, and some of the conflict comes from when we aren't at peace with ourselves. It's why we start with the self-work, right? Because if we don't develop the foundation of care of the self, and I know that self-care is a buzzword, I know that wellness is something that we talk about all the time, and every time companies see, oh, we're doing a self-care training, people groan a little bit inside. But the truth is, it's super hard to develop a self-care routine. Any of you that have tried to like spend 5 minutes in the morning drinking your coffee, staring off into the sunset, most days I only make it about 2 minutes before I like pick up my phone or I turn on the news, because the constant influx of information has fed me for so long. And so when we talk about, I love that you brought that conflict up, because I have the same issue, right? I love doing supervision. I love helping new therapists find their voice, do their pre-licensure stuff. And it's really hard for me because it's one of the most draining things that I do as well. I love doing individual therapy. I love doing trainings. I love public speaking, all of those things. But the one-on-one work with people who are really at the beginning of their careers is super, super tough for me, because so much empathy goes into helping people discover their voice as a clinician. And I think what you've identified is how important it is to really be dedicated to that self-care work while we're still building those things in our community. Because I don't know how many people are on, maybe 20 or so, but I would guess that all 20 of the people that are on this call could probably tell you where you add value. So the work that you got to do now is on believing it and identifying it for yourself. And that's some of the tougher work. It's why I focus on the self-work first. Here's a really funny picture of me and my business partner. We look very studious, working outside. Her name is G. She lives in Maui. I think she's a phenomenal human. It's my contact information if you guys have thoughts, questions, if you want to give me some feedback. I love feedback, so I'm always open to hearing that. I want to be super respectful of your guys' time, but I also want to give you the option to ask questions. So if anybody else has questions, I would love to talk more or hear more. We have maybe, I don't know, 5-ish minutes left.
Anyone have ahas or anything that they'd like to share?
Yeah.
It's kind of nice. It gives you something to have sights on where, does your 1 match 2? Does 1 and 2 match 3? And does 1, 2, 3 match 4? If not, it's okay, but you got some stuff to sort through.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it helps those of us who are more concrete thinkers or more linear thinkers, right? If you do a bunch of work on the self and it's all sort of nebulous, it can be really hard to like bring it all together if you think really logically. So I hope, I'm glad to hear that that helped you sort of move through that and give a little bit of maybe structure to the activity.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the feedback.
My aha was I kind of reduced it and brought it down to 1 word, and that was, well, 2 words, to inspire, which turns out to be my Hawaiian name, the meaning of my Hawaiian name. So I'm like, oh, well, that was insightful.
I love that. What a cool takeaway.
one thing I wrote down is that there's no endpoint to your why. That makes perfect sense, but I didn't, it sounds simple and obvious, but I didn't really think of it like that. So I think that was important.
Yeah. And, sort of even in leaving your legacy behind, it's never over, because your legacy gets passed on to generations, and then those generations modify and change and build on that legacy, and then it continues and continues. I think about all the political discussions that we've been having over the last week. Those were started hundreds of years ago with people who in some ways had foresight into what was going to happen now, but we built it and changed it and modified it. And so the why of all of those folks is still living wildly today, obviously maybe a little more controversial than we would like, but still living very obviously today. So I think legacy is it's helpful if you think about it as a continuous, as opposed to just like the day you perish.
Anyone else have any ahas or feedback or questions? If not, Heather, do you want to put your contact information back on the screen just for a minute? Just make sure that everyone took a screenshot of it or wrote it down or whatever. But are you accepting personal consultations or clients at the moment?
Yep.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to reach out to her for that, shoot her over an email. And we're going to keep having Heather back on a monthly basis. So Monday Mindset has been revamped to Monthly Mindset, which is in this format. And as you heard from her, she's open to feedback and questions and things, and we'll keep this transition. So today was about finding your why, and then she'll have something in store for us for next month. Same, well, basically it's exactly a month, right? So we're going to do it on the 13th. Or was it the 13th, or is it the second Friday? What did we decide?
I think
It is
What'd you say, Hannah?
December 11th.
Yeah, it's the second Friday of every month.
Okay, second Friday, so it'll be December 11th. Awesome. Heather, thank you so much for coming back and doing this with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll keep growing it. So spread the word, guys. Invite people. And if it's people that's outside of KW, come from Contribution, invite them as well. We'd love to have other people on here as well.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure to sort of get out of my own head and share the things that I'm interested in with all of you. So I'm super grateful to be able to spend this time with all of you, and can't wait already for next week or next month. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you, Heather. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Heather.
See you next month. Have a good
Thanks,
weekend.
Heather. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for the emoji.